I wasn't always the man you fear. I wasn't always the laughter echoing through dark alleys or the smear of red paint that makes grown men tremble. No, before the smile, before him, I was something far worse. Ordinary. I remember the city as it used to be, or at least how I thought it was. Gotham has a way of infecting people with illusions, dressing misery in neon lights so you think it's glamorous. Back then I walked the streets with my head low, hands shoved into pockets with holes. My shoes were worn, my jacket smelled like damp concrete, and my dreams, well, I had polished those dreams until they were almost believable. I wanted to make people laugh. Can you imagine that? Me, the future nightmare of Gotham, once believed laughter was medicine. I thought humor could erase pain. I thought people wanted to be happy. I even stood on cheap wooden stages under buzzing yellow bulbs reciting jokes no one cared to hear. Crowds weren't cruel. They were indifferent. Somehow that hurt more. You can fight cruelty. You can't fight being invisible. My apartment was no bigger than a storage closet, though I was grateful it had a window. The glass pane rattled whenever trains passed, and on windy nights it wailed like a trapped animal. I used to sit there watching the world carry on without me, people rushing to jobs they hated, to relationships that would fail, chasing money that would slip through their fingers. And yet they looked purposeful. I envied that. Purpose. That word haunted me even before I realized why. My job back then, calling it a job feels generous, was to hand out flyers dressed as a clown on the corner of 7th Avenue. Children pointed, adults snickered. Some didn't even see me as a person. A man once pushed me aside because I was blocking his view of the bus. Funny how people treat you like furniture long before you become a monster. Still, I tried. I really did. I practiced jokes in front of a cracked mirror. I rehearsed smiles, the kind I hoped felt warm, not desperate. I imagined audiences applauding, laughing with me, not at me. Every night I told myself things would get better, and every morning the city proved me wrong. Then came the debts. Rent overdue, bills piling up like forgotten secrets, and collectors pounding at the door. My wife tried to help. She believed in me more than I did, though I'm not sure why. She had a softness I couldn't protect. Sometimes she would hold my face in her hands and say, "We'll find a way." But Gotham doesn't give ways. It gives traps. I began performing stand-up at a grimy little bar near the docks. The owner liked me because I bought cheap drinks and didn't complain about the broken microphone. The crowds were drunk enough to listen, but sober enough to judge. My hands would shake as I held the mic, and my voice would crack like a teenager's. I told jokes about poverty, about bad luck, about the absurdity of life. They laughed occasionally. Not because the jokes were good, but because misery is funniest when it happens to someone else. I thought, if I could just succeed once, one solid set, one moment of connection, everything would turn around. But life doesn't pivot on hope. It pivots on accidents. The accident that changed me began with a single simple question. Are you interested in making real money? A man in a wrinkled suit asked me that after one of my sets. He said he had connections, opportunities. He said he saw potential. I should have known then. Anyone who sees potential in desperation is either a liar or a criminal. Sometimes both. But I was tired. Tired of failing. Tired of surviving. Tired of being a joke with no punchline. So I listened. He spoke about a chemical plant, about a job that needed a man who could take a risk. I laughed, genuinely laughed, because risk was the only currency I had to spare. I asked what the job was. He leaned in, whispered it like a secret shared between sinners, and for the first time in months, I felt something like adrenaline, like life. My wife begged me not to do it. She held my hands, trembling, and said, "We can find another way." But I had learned something important by then. Another way is a myth people use to avoid despair. There is no other way. There is only the way you choose and the way you pay for it. I didn't know, of course. I didn't know that night would shatter me, that it would burn away the man I used to be and leave only the laughter. I didn't know the world would finally notice me, but only after it was too late. I only knew one thing. Tomorrow, I was going to the plant, and something deep inside me whispered, "At last, you have a purpose." The next morning came too quickly. I barely slept. My mind buzzed like a dying fluorescent bulb, flickering with excitement and dread. I kept imagining my wife's face, her eyes swollen from crying, her voice trembling as she begged me not to go. She said we could survive without the money. She said we still had each other. But love doesn't pay rent in Gotham. Love is a luxury the poor can't afford. I left before sunrise. The city was quiet, washed in grey fog that clung to the streets like a ghost reluctant to move on. I remember thinking the world looked peaceful for once, softened by the early morning haze. Maybe if everything had gone differently, I'd still see the world that way. But that day the fog was just a shroud, and I walked willingly into my own funeral without knowing it. The men who hired me were already waiting near the old chemical plant. It towered above us like a metal skeleton, pipes hissing, vents groaning, and smoke drifting from chimneys like the breath of some slumbering beast. I had passed the plant dozens of times in my life, but never this close. It smelled of burnt chemicals and rotten promises. "Right on time," the man in the wrinkled suit said. His smile was too wide, too rehearsed, the kind of smile con artists practice in their bathroom mirrors. He introduced the others, two men whose names I don't remember, and one whose name I wish I could forget. Their plan was simple: break into the plant's research wing, steal some documents, slip out unnoticed, and sell the information to a rival corporation. Corporate espionage dressed up like a petty theft. They made it sound easy, like a stroll through the park, but nothing in Gotham is ever easy, especially not crime. They gave me a costume. A ridiculous red hood, stiff and suffocating, with a cape attached for some inexplicable reason. "It's just to throw off security," they told me. "Cameras catch the costume, not the man inside." I didn't know then that this hood already had a reputation, one soaked in failure, betrayal, and death. I put it on anyway. Desperation makes fools of us all. Inside the plant, the air was hot and thick, carrying the scent of chemicals that stung my eyes. Metal clanged in the distance. Machines hummed with mechanical indifference. Shadows stretched across the corridors like long fingers reaching for us. My heart pounded with every step, and I could barely breathe inside the hood. The men moved quickly, clearly familiar with the layout. I stumbled behind them, trying to keep up, trying to quiet the panic clawing at my throat. This wasn't a performance. There was no audience, no microphone, no stage lights to comfort me. This was real danger, and I was in way over my head. Then everything went wrong. Security had been increased without the men knowing. Within minutes, alarms shrieked through the building. Red lights flashed like angry eyes. The men cursed, shouting orders at each other. Someone grabbed my arm, pulling me forward, yelling that we had to run. I tripped over metal grates, nearly falling, my vision blurred. The hood felt like it was shrinking around my face. Gunshots echoed. Panic exploded in my chest. We reached a catwalk above a massive vat of chemicals, glowing green, swirling like a toxic ocean, waiting to swallow its next victim. The air above it shimmered, distorting everything like a nightmare painted on heated glass. One of the guards shouted for us to stop. More gunshots. The men fired back. I froze, trembling, every instinct screaming at me to run. Then one of them pushed me. "Go!" he shouted. "You're the distraction." A distraction. That's all I ever was to anyone. I ran along the catwalk, the metal rattling under my feet. The guards followed. I tried to climb a ladder to escape, but the hood slipped over my eyes. I couldn't see. I couldn't breathe. Someone grabbed me. I panicked and swung wildly. My foot slipped. For a moment there was silence. Then gravity took me. I fell, down, down into the churning green abyss. The chemicals embraced me, burning my skin, searing my lungs, crawling into every pore like living fire. I tried to scream, but the liquid forced itself into my mouth. My vision went white. My mind shattered into 1,000 pieces. I don't remember crawling out of the drainage pipe. I don't remember the screams of the workers who saw me. I only remember the pain, unimaginable, all-consuming pain, and the laughter. My own laughter, broken, hysterical, echoing through the dark tunnels as the chemicals stripped away the man I used to be. When I reached the outside air, I collapsed. The pain dulled into numbness, my heartbeat slowed, my vision blurred. But when I saw my reflection in a puddle beneath me, I didn't see myself. I saw him, white skin, green hair, red lips cracked into a permanent, horrifying grin. The accident hadn't killed me. It had revealed me. I laughed until my throat bled. I don't know how long I lay on the cold pavement outside the chemical plant. Minutes, hours, maybe a lifetime. The sky above me spun like a carousel of sickly grey clouds, every rotation tugging my stomach into knots. My skin burned, my eyes stung, my thoughts shattered and reformed like broken glass, trying to remember it was once a mirror. But the laughter, oh, the laughter! It escaped me without permission, bubbling up like poison from a cracked barrel. It wasn't a laugh I recognized. It didn't belong to a man. It belonged to something newly born, something raw and unhinged. I remember clutching my stomach, gasping for air, yet unable to stop laughing. It hurt. Every cackle scraped my throat, but it felt right. It felt true. And truth, real truth, is always followed by pain. Eventually, I pushed myself to my feet. My clothes dripped with fluorescent slime that clung to my skin, mutating into strange textures as it dried. I stumbled forward, every step sharp and trembling, guided by instinct rather than reason. Then I saw the puddle again, my reflection. The twisted face staring back at me wasn't a mask. It wasn't makeup. It was me. Pale white skin stretched ghost-like over sharp cheekbones. Green hair matted to my forehead. And the smile, that grotesque blood-red curve carved across my face, was permanent, irreversible. Ha! Ha ha! The sound was soft at first. Then it grew and grew and grew. When I finally tore myself away from the reflection, I knew one thing. I couldn't go home. Not like this. My wife, she wouldn't recognize me. Worse, she would pity me. And pity was the one emotion I refused to endure again. Not anymore. Not from anyone. So I walked. I hid in alleyways, pressed against brick walls, avoiding the stares of strangers. Even then, I knew people would look at me differently, not with indifference, not with polite avoidance, but with fear. It was intoxicating in a way I didn't yet understand. The city I once tiptoed around now seemed to part before me. I reached our building by nightfall. The stairwell was darker than usual, the overhead lights flickering like dying fireflies. Each step echoed too loudly, reminding me of the empty, brittle shell I had become. When I reached our door, my hand hovered over the knob. My fingers trembled. For a moment, I imagined a different version of myself pushing the door open. The old me, naive, beaten down, still crawling toward hope like a gravely wounded animal. I imagined my wife embracing me, telling me everything would be all right. But that version of me was dead, and I had no right to drag her into the grave with me. I turned away. Instead, I knocked gently, almost instinctively, a ghost tapping politely before vanishing forever. I heard footsteps, soft ones, hers, then her voice. "Who is it?" I froze. I wanted to answer. I wanted to say her name, to tell her I loved her, that I was sorry. But all that came out was a strangled half-laugh, half-sob, a sound so disturbing even I flinched at it. Silence. Then the door creaked open, just a sliver, just enough for one eye, just enough for her to see what I had become. Her gasp was sharp enough to cut me. The door slammed shut. I heard the lock slide. Twice. I pressed my forehead against the wood. It felt cold, real, solid, something I could cling to before I fell apart completely. "I'm sorry," I whispered, but my voice cracked, distorted, unrecognizable, a parody of speech. Inside, she was crying. I could hear her. Those sobs didn't sound like the woman who used to hold me, comfort me. They sounded like someone mourning someone already dead. And maybe she was. I stepped back from the door. My legs shook. Something inside me twisted painfully, like the last dying remnant of who I used to be, trying desperately to claw its way back into existence. But laughter killed it. A soft giggle at first, then a chuckle, then a stream of manic, unstoppable laughter that filled the entire hallway. I didn't choose to laugh. It simply erupted out of me, smothering guilt, grief, love, everything. Laughter was easier. Laughter didn't hurt. Laughter didn't care. By the time I reached the street again, the laughter had transformed into something calmer, a steady hum, a promise, a seed. That night, in the reflection of every shop window, every puddle, every dark glass surface I passed, I saw the same truth staring back at me. The world had taken everything from me. Dignity, hope, dreams, love. It had chewed me up and spat me out. Now it would learn what I had learned. If life is a joke, then the only sane response is to laugh. And I wasn't going to be the punchline anymore. The night after I lost everything felt strangely liberating. Not peaceful, no. That would imply some kind of calm. What I felt was sharp, electric, like every nerve in my body had been rewired, stripped, and left exposed. Every sound was too loud, every light too bright, every passing face too meaningful. The world finally looked back at me, not with pity, not with boredom, but with fear. Fear, pure, genuine, undiluted fear, is intoxicating. I didn't understand that before. I do now. It's the only emotion that guarantees honesty. No one lies when they're terrified. No one pretends. Fear makes people show their real faces, and I wanted to peel those faces back, one by one, and see what they were all hiding. But before any grand revelations, I needed a place to think. I wandered through Gotham with no destination. The streets buzzed with life, honking cars, yelling vendors, music leaking from half-lit bars. Somewhere a couple argued loudly, somewhere else a child cried. All of it felt distant, like I was watching the city through a cracked lens. Eventually, I found myself in a narrow alley behind a pawn shop. I slid down the brick wall and sat there, knees pulled to my chest, listening to the wet drip of a nearby pipe. My mind spun. I tried to piece together who I was now, what I was supposed to do. The old me would have tried to fix things. The old me would have tried to go back. But the chemicals hadn't just changed my face. They'd changed my mind. Thoughts that used to drift now rushed. Ideas that once died in the cradle now screamed for birth, and beneath all of it, a rhythm, a pulse, laughter rolling endlessly under the surface like distant thunder. I brought my hands to my face. My skin felt smooth and cold, almost like porcelain. My smile, always there, always curved upward, felt foreign, an imposter hijacking my expression. I tried to frown. I couldn't. My face refused to obey. "Beautiful," I whispered ironically, tracing the outline of my painted-on grin. From the corner of my eye, I saw movement. A stray dog approached, ribs visible beneath patchy fur. It looked at me cautiously, whining softly. For a moment I thought it might sense something wrong in me, something monstrous, but it came closer. It sniffed my hand and nudged it with its nose, and for a fleeting, fragile second, I felt something I hadn't felt since the fall. Connection. Acceptance. Then a man shouted from the street, Get out of here!" He kicked the dog hard. The animal yelped and ran. I stared at the man, a large brute of a human, drunk, staggering, smelling like stale alcohol and broken promises. He scowled at me next. "What the hell you looking at, clown?" Clown, that word again, always that word. A laugh bubbled up, involuntary. The man frowned, confused. The laugh grew louder. He stepped back, and something inside me snapped like a brittle bone. I stood up slowly. My smile, that permanent, cursed, beautiful smile, caught the dim streetlight, and his eyes widened. "You're crazy," he muttered. I approached him one step at a time. He backed away. I didn't touch him. I didn't threaten him. I didn't need to. He ran before I could blink, tripping over his own feet as he disappeared down the street. And for the first time since the accident, I felt powerful. Not strong, not respected, powerful. Fear had given me something laughter never had. Presence. People finally saw me. I wandered out of the alley feeling lighter, buoyed by an energy I couldn't name. The city had been ignoring me my whole life. Now it recoiled at the sight of me. It listened. It backed away. It obeyed. Every few steps I caught glimpses of my reflection in windows. Not the man I once was, but the man the world had made me. Pale, grinning, eyes like cracked emeralds, full of something wild. I stopped in front of a closed store's large glass window. My reflection stood tall, shoulders relaxed, smile stretched wide. I tilted my head. The reflection did too. I raised a hand. It followed. "Who are you?" I asked it softly. A whisper from somewhere deep inside me answered, "I am what remains when the world stops pretending." I laughed again, a slow, rising giggle that echoed into the empty street. It felt good, too good. As if laughter was no longer just a sound, but a release valve for the chaos swirling inside me. I needed a direction, a purpose, something to mold this new identity into shape. And as fate would have it, that direction walked right by me. A patrol car rolled down the street, lights off, two officers inside chatting casually, unaware of the monster they were driving past. My eyes narrowed, memories flashed. The chase in the chemical plant, the shouts, the guns, the fall. The police had chased me to my death. They had a part in my rebirth. A spark ignited in my mind. Maybe purpose wasn't something you found. Maybe it was something you created, something chaotic, something loud, something unforgettable. I smiled wider, as if that were possible. If the world wanted a villain, I would give it one worth fearing. I followed the patrol car from a distance, slipping through shadows like a whisper. The officers had no idea I was behind them. No idea the man they chased into a vat of chemicals was now strolling casually a few steps away, reborn and eager. My steps were light, almost playful. I felt like a child discovering a new toy, except the toy was fear and the joy. Oh, the joy was indescribable. Every time the officers slowed down, I slowed. When they turned, I turned. When they paused at an intersection, I watched them through the reflection of a cracked bus stop frame. Their voices drifted faintly through the open window. "Guy in the red hood, dead for sure. Chemical waste. Nobody survives that. Case closed. Case closed." That phrase rolled around in my mind like a marble clattering inside an empty skull. They thought I was dead. Everyone did. The realization didn't sting. It thrilled me. A dead man can do anything. A ghost has no rules. A memory cannot be controlled. I wasn't trapped by who I had been anymore. I was free. The patrol car stopped at a late-night diner. The officers stepped out, stretching their weary limbs, complaining about long shifts and cold coffee. I slipped inside the alley beside the diner and listened. Their words, meaningless as they were, felt like threads of a tapestry I was finally learning to unravel. They didn't care about me. They never had. They cared about paperwork, about routines, about convenience. Wasn't that the story of my entire life? People caring only when caring benefited them. I chuckled, leaning against the dented metal dumpster. My laugh echoed off the walls. A stray cat shot out of the trash can and vanished into the dark. Then I noticed the back door of the diner, propped open with a brick, letting steam and the smell of burnt bacon drift out. Inside, the kitchen buzzed with activity. Loud cooks, clattering utensils, sizzling grease, a chaotic symphony, almost inviting. And there, hanging on a hook near the doorway, was an apron, white, clean. An idea slithered into my mind, wicked yet simple. Why follow the police when I could greet them? I approached the back door, slipped inside, and snatched the apron. A line cook glanced at me but didn't question it, just yelled, "Order up!" before turning back to his frying pan. Perfect. I tied the apron on, straightened it, and stepped into the diner's front area. The bell above the door tinkled softly as I pushed through. A few customers sat scattered around, nursing late-night meals with tired eyes. Then the officers entered. The moment they saw me, they froze. Their eyes widened. One of them dropped his cup. Their fear hit me like a shot of adrenaline. I moved slowly, theatrically, placing a hand over my heart as if touched. "Oh, officers," I said, my voice silky and mocking. "You look like you've seen a ghost." But the younger one reached for his holster. His fingers shook. The older one stammered, "You're supposed to be dead." I finished for him, raising an eyebrow. "Yes, well, I was never very good at staying where people put me." The younger officer swallowed hard. "Stay back." I laughed, a long, rising cackle that filled the room like smoke. Conversation stopped. Forks paused mid-air. Even the ceiling fan seemed to slow. "Relax, officer. If I wanted you dead," I leaned in slightly, "you wouldn't have seen me coming." He paled. I stepped back, lifting my hands in mock surrender. "I'm not here for violence tonight. No, tonight is a special night, a celebration." A what?" the older officer muttered. "My rebirth," I said, spreading my arms wide as if addressing a crowd on stage. "A second chance, a new beginning." I tapped the side of my head. "A clearer perspective." The younger officer's voice cracked. "What do you want?" I tilted my head, letting the question linger. What did I want? For the first time I truly thought about it. Not survival, not acceptance, not love. I wanted acknowledgement, recognition, a spotlight. I wanted the world to know that the man it broke had come back with teeth. I said slowly, savoring the tension, to share a joke." Neither officer moved. No one did. "What joke?" the older one whispered. "The one life played on me," I replied softly. "The one I'm now going to play on everyone else." I stepped away from them, toward the exit. "Tell your friends, officers," I said as I pushed the door open. "Tell them Gotham has a new punchline." I bowed dramatically, a sick parody of politeness, and left the diner. The door swung shut behind me. Silence. Then chaos erupted inside as the officers scrambled for their radios. Outside, I breathed in the cold night air. Every sound felt sharper, every light brighter, every heartbeat, mine and the city's, faster. This was just the beginning. Let them think I was dangerous. Let them fear the unknown. Let them whisper about the pale man with the impossible smile. A legend had been born, not crafted, not planned, born violently, accidentally, beautifully, and Gotham would never forget me again. I didn't run. That's the funniest part. The police inside the diner were scrambling, yelling into their radios, tripping over each other to report that the dead man had walked in, wearing a smile carved by tragedy itself. And me? I strolled down the street like an evening walker enjoying the city lights. Every step felt intentional, theatrical. I wasn't escaping. I was debuting. The air was crisp enough to sting my lungs, the kind of Gotham winter that made people hunch their shoulders and rush home. But I breathed it in deeply, savoring the burn. Pain was a familiar friend now. It sharpened my thoughts, steadied my new identity. I reached a bridge overlooking the river. The water below rippled black and green under the street lamps, looking almost identical to the vat that rebirthed me. I leaned on the railing, listening to the distant sirens beginning to gather. They didn't know where I went yet, but they would soon. Word travels fast when fear fuels the wind, and I wanted that wind. I wanted it to carry my name across every alley, every bar, every living room. I wanted to be inevitable, but I needed a name first. I gazed at the water, and my reflection stared back. Pale skin glowing under the moonlight, green hair shimmering like toxic algae, the permanent crimson smile shining like a wound that refused to close. No more stage names assigned by fools, no more pitiful attempts at comedy. This face, this visage, was comedy carved into flesh. It was mockery incarnate. It was the punchline the universe gave me. "What am I?" I whispered. My reflection didn't answer, but behind me the city's muffled laughter, sirens, horns, distant screams, life and chaos blending together did, and the answer clicked. A jester of chaos, a harbinger of unpredictability, a clown born from the world's cruelty, a joker. The word tasted perfect on my tongue, not a name forced on me, a name I chose. I threw my head back and laughed at the sky, a laugh that sliced through the cold air like a whip, startling a flock of birds from the nearby trees. The sound echoed across the river, bouncing back to me, multiplied, distorted, transformed. Joker. Yes, that was me now. A new purpose swelled inside me. If the world insisted on being a cruel, senseless joke, then I would be its master of ceremonies. I would set the stage. I would write the script. I would show them the absurdity they pretended not to see. But to do that, I needed more than a name. I needed an identity, a style, a symbol. The chemicals had given me the face, but a legend needed a signature. I turned away from the bridge, heading toward the heart of the city. It didn't take long to find what I needed. A rundown costume shop still lit by a flickering sign. The window displayed faded outfits. Clowns, jesters, magicians, though none of them resembled me. Perfect. I pushed the door open. A bell jingled overhead, though it sounded reluctant, like everything in Gotham, tired to the bone. An old man behind the counter looked up. His eyes narrowed. "We're closed," he said. I smiled wider. Not that I had any choice. "Oh, but I'm open." He flinched. His hand trembled over the counter as he instinctively stepped back. I could practically smell his fear, thick and metallic like blood. I wandered aisles of dusty fabric until I found it, a purple suit jacket, slightly oversized, slightly worn, but vibrant as a bruise. I slipped it on. It fit like destiny had picked out the measurements. I found matching pants, a green vest, a flower pin, gloves. Piece by piece, the Joker took shape. When I stepped in front of the shop's long mirror, I saw not a broken man, but a character bursting with life, a mad elegance, a twisted flair, a herald of beautiful disorder. The old man's voice cracked. Please, take whatever you want. Just go." I turned to him slowly. "You misunderstand. I'm not stealing." He looked confused. "I'm investing," I clarified. "An image is important after all. You've helped craft a legend." He didn't understand, but that didn't matter. I reached into my pocket and dropped a handful of damp, chemical-stained bills onto the counter. The money was nearly ruined, but it was the gesture that mattered. He stared at the bills, unsure whether to be grateful or terrified, probably both. I tipped an imaginary hat and strutted out into the street. Now I felt complete, or as complete as someone like me could be. Purple suit, green vest, red smile, chaos in the eyes, a living punchline. Sirens grew louder. The hunt had begun again, but this time they weren't chasing a man in a red hood. They were chasing an idea, and ideas are much harder to kill. As I walked down the center of the road, cars screeched to a halt at the sight of me. Horns blasted, drivers cursed, one woman screamed. It was music to my ears. Spotlights danced above as patrol helicopters searched for the dead man in the clown makeup. I spread my arms wide, spinning slowly, laughing up at the choppers. Let them come. Let them see. Tonight wasn't about escape. It was about introduction. And Gotham. Gotham was finally meeting the Joker. I remember the night by its colors, not the ordinary ones that cling to memory, but the smeared, melting, bleeding colors that only appear when reality finally gives up. I wasn't the Joker yet, not the man the city whispers about, not the thing parents use to scare children into obedience. No, back then I was still trying to be good, trying to be normal, trying to survive. Life has a sense of humor sharper than mine ever was. It gives you just enough hope to make the fall worth watching. That night I was backstage at the club, sitting on a wooden crate that rocked every time I breathed. The other comedians avoided looking at me. No one wanted to catch failure like a contagious disease. I could hear the crowd outside, drunk laughter, clinking glasses, the frustrated coughs of the impatient. They were hungry, and I was tonight's sacrifice. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the weight of everything collapsing at once. We were behind on rent again. My wife had been crying earlier, quietly, in that way people do when they don't want to blame you but can't help needing something you can't provide. The doctor bills were stacked on the kitchen table like a monument to how powerless I was. I looked in the cracked dressing room mirror, trying to practice a smile. It twitched wrong, too wide, too nervous, like it belonged to someone who had just lost a bet with fate. 3 minutes, the stage manager grunted. He didn't look at me either. I tried to breathe. I tried to remember my routine, but the jokes felt dead in my mouth, like I was trying to resuscitate corpses. When I stepped on stage, the spotlight hit me so hard it felt like judgment made of light. The room blurred into a single dark mass of silhouettes. I delivered my first joke, silence second, a cough third, a groan fourth. Someone laughed, but it was the kind of laugh people use when they're mocking, not amused. My throat tightened. I felt the walls closing in, crushing what little pride I had left. When I finished, the applause was polite. The sort you give a child for trying hard, even though he failed spectacularly. I walked off stage, drowning in humiliation. But that wasn't the breaking point. Not yet. The breaking point came when I got home. The door was slightly open. For a moment I thought my wife had forgotten to lock it. But when I stepped inside, the air was wrong, heavy, cold, like something terrible had happened and the room hadn't stopped trembling from it. 2 officers were standing in the living room. My wife was gone, dead. An accident, they said. A stupid, senseless accident. Wrong place, wrong time. Words that meant nothing because they couldn't bring back the only person who ever thought I was worth loving. I didn't speak. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply broke. Not loudly, not dramatically. Quietly. Like a thin wire snapping inside a machine no one expects to fail until it burns the whole building down. The officers left. The silence stayed. I sat on the floor until dawn, holding the last photograph we had taken together. Her smile soft, mine awkward but real. Real in a way I didn't know how to be anymore. That night didn't create the Joker. No, it simply removed the last piece of the man I used to be. It stripped away hope, fear, dreams, sanity, all the unnecessary decorations that keep people obedient. What remained was a question. If the world can take everything from me without warning, without fairness, without reason, why should I owe the world anything in return? That was the night everything broke, and once something breaks enough times it doesn't shatter, it sharpens. They always talk about the moment a man becomes a monster, as if it happens in an explosion of madness, a lightning strike, a scream, a violent rebirth. But the truth is quieter. Monsters are shaped the same way statues are, slowly, chisel by chisel, piece by piece, until the original form is unrecognizable. After my wife died, the world didn't suddenly feel darker. It just felt empty, like someone had erased the background music of life, leaving only the buzzing of fluorescent lights and the hollow echo of my own footsteps. Days blurred. I walked through them like a ghost, carrying a body I no longer considered mine. And then came them. 2 men in cheap suits, the kind that try too hard to look respectable, approached me outside my old workplace. They knew my name. They knew where I lived. They knew everything. "You did some engineering at Ace Chemicals, right?" the taller one asked, lighting a cigarette with fingers that shook just a little too much. "Briefly," I muttered. "I quit." "Doesn't matter," the shorter one said, his smile too thin, too sharp. "We need a guide, a live map, someone who knows the place well enough to get us in and out without trouble." I almost walked away, but then the tall one said the number, the amount of money they'd pay me, enough to cover rent, enough for food, enough to keep surviving just a little longer, enough that if she were still alive, she might have told me not to take it. But she wasn't alive, and I had nothing left to lose. They led me into a dimly lit bar where their boss waited, a man known only as the Red Hood. He wore a glossy red helmet that reflected my face back at me in warped distortion. A joke, I later realized. Everyone under that hood looked ridiculous, shiny, faceless, a perfect fall guy. "We use the hood to confuse witnesses," the boss explained casually. "No one can describe a face they never saw." He said it like he was describing a new kitchen gadget, not a criminal persona. The plan was simple. lead the gang through ace chemicals, point out patrol routes, disable a few systems, and let them handle the rest. A heist. A stupid, desperate heist. I didn't want to do it, but desperation doesn't ask permission. It just pushes you forward and whispers, just one more bad decision. What's the worst that could happen? The night of the job arrived. I stood in a filthy bathroom, staring at my reflection in the hood. Smooth, polished, sinister. Inside the helmet, the sound of my breathing echoed back at me, slow and hollow, like the world had shrunk down to the inside of my skull. When we reached the plant, my hands trembled with every step. I remembered the hallways from my old shifts, but everything felt different now. Colder, sharper, like the building itself could sense what we were planning. We slipped in through a side door. Everything went smoothly at first, too smoothly. But life isn't generous twice. Halfway to the lab vaults, the sirens screamed. Someone had tipped off the police. Panic tore through the gang instantly. They scattered like roaches in the light. Gunfire echoed down the metal corridors. Shouts ricocheted off the walls. The smell of chemicals and burning wires filled the air. And then he appeared. Batman. To this day, I don't know if he came for the gang or if he came for something deeper. A calling, a fate, a cosmic joke. But when I saw him, tall, dark, a living nightmare wrapped in armor, I felt something I hadn't felt since the night my wife died. Fear. He charged toward me, and in my panic I stumbled backward, over a railing, into the yawning void of the chemical vat below. The world fell away. My body twisted in the air. The hood flew off, spinning into darkness. And then, impact. Liquid colder than death swallowed me whole. It clung to my skin, burned through my eyes, wormed its way into every pore, every breath, every scream. I should have died. I think part of me did. When I crawled out of the waste pipeline hours later, gasping, choking, half-mad, I saw my reflection in a puddle. Skin bleached white, hair stained green, lips torn into a permanent red grin. I didn't recognize the face looking back at me, but I liked it better, because that man, the one who fell in, he had something to lose. The thing that crawled out, he had nothing, and nothing is dangerous. When I pulled myself out of that drainage ditch, soaked in chemicals and filth, I thought the worst was over. But fate, my old, loyal companion, wasn't done with me yet. The night air hit my skin like ice. Every nerve screamed. My vision flickered, colors blurring at the edges like a watercolor left in the rain. My heart thrashed inside my chest, not with fear, but with something new, something sharp, electric. Alive. I stumbled through the back alleys, leaving wet footprints that glowed faintly under the streetlights. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't care. Some instinct, animal, primal, dragged me forward. At some point I collapsed against a brick wall. I don't know how long I stayed there, minutes, hours. Time had stopped being linear. It folded and twisted around my thoughts. When I finally stood and found my way back toward the city, I passed a broken window. It was small, just a warped piece of glass clinging to a rusted frame. But it showed me everything, my reflection. My skin was white, bone white, like bleached porcelain. My hair had turned a sickening electric green. My mouth, my lips looked carved, stretched into a grotesque bloody smile the chemicals had burned into my skin. A permanent joke, a cosmic punchline written across my face. I stared at that stranger in the glass. And then I laughed, not a chuckle, not a nervous giggle. A full, echoing, uncontrollable laugh that poured out of me like water bursting through a broken dam. It was raw, painful, liberating. It was the first true laugh I'd had in years. See, the old me, the desperate comedian, the hopeless husband, the frightened man. He never would have survived this. He would have cried, panicked, begged for help. But he was gone, dead. The chemical vat had been his coffin, and the thing crawling out of it was something the world had created but never expected to meet. I walked the streets in that new skin, the laughter still trembling in my throat. People stared, some screamed. One old woman fainted. A man across the street dropped his groceries and ran like I was the devil himself. And maybe I was. Not because of how I looked, but because of what I no longer felt. Fear, gone. Shame, dead. Hope, irrelevant. Pain. Pain was still there, but it didn't hurt the same way anymore. It buzzed, it glowed, it fed something inside me. As dawn approached, I made my way back to the apartment, the little home I once shared with her. I don't even remember climbing the stairs. One moment I was outside the building. The next, I was standing in the doorway of our empty living room. The police tape still hung across the doorframe. I stepped through it without slowing down. The house smelled like dust and absence. I sat on the floor, in the same spot where I had collapsed the night they told me she was gone. I picked up the same photograph I had held then, the one of us smiling together. Her smile was warm. Mine was awkward. Now my smile was something else entirely, something irreversible. I stared at that picture for a long time. My hands trembled, but not with grief, with anticipation, with clarity, with nothing left to lose. I whispered to the empty room, "A man can finally do anything." And that's when the laughter returned, softer this time, more controlled, more intentional. Not madness, not yet, purpose. I rose to my feet. The world had taken everything from me, my love, my future, my identity. So I decided to return the favor, piece by piece, person by person, laugh by laugh, and oh, how glorious that laugh felt. It was the sound of rebirth, the sound of freedom, the sound of the Joker stretching his legs for the very first time. The morning after my rebirth, I discovered something strange. Not about the world had always been strange, but about myself. The mirror no longer frightened me. For most people, the mirror is a judge. It points out flaws, reflects insecurities, shows all the ways you failed to be the person you're pretending to be. But when I looked in the mirror now, for the first time in my life, I saw honesty. My white skin, my green hair, the red scars. They weren't a costume. They weren't makeup. They were truth made visible. The outside finally matched what the inside had always been screaming. I leaned closer, studying the new me. My eyes looked brighter, not with joy. No, that's not the right word, but with awakening. Like someone had turned the lights on in a room I'd lived in all my life but never truly seen. My smile, my glorious permanent smile, curved like a cruel joke carved by the universe itself. I touched my cheek. The skin felt tight, stretched, raw. It hurt when I pressed. But the pain only made me laugh harder. It reminded me I wasn't dreaming, that this wasn't some fever hallucination. This was evolution. And evolution deserves celebration. I rummaged through the drawers, pulling out old makeup. Hers, not mine. She had loved color. Bright reds, deep purples, soft pinks. She used to tell me makeup wasn't about beauty, but about expression, painting how you felt inside. I never understood that. Not then. But now it made perfect sense. I opened a compact of deep, glowing red. The powder shimmered like crushed rubies. With a trembling finger, I traced the shade over my lips. Though it barely made a difference, the chemical scars already gave me that eternal grin. Still, I applied it anyway. Not to hide anything, but to highlight it. A little flare never hurt. Next came the eyes. Dark, smudged, chaotic strokes. Circles of smeared black that widened my already frenzied gaze. It made my reflection look unhinged and perfect. I tilted my head, asked the mirror, "What do you think?" It didn't answer. But the man staring back was all the approval I needed. Fully painted, fully reborn, I suited up in the best thing I could find in my closet. One of my old performance outfits. A cheap, faded purple jacket. One I used to wear on stage when I still thought I could make people laugh. Funny, isn't it? I had dreamed of being a comedian. Now I was about to become the funniest thing to ever happen to this city. I slipped the jacket on, and suddenly I didn't feel like the man who had worn it before. It fit differently, more confidently, more chaotically, like it belonged to someone who finally understood the punchline of life. I strutted across the apartment, laughing as I spun, the jacket flaring around me like a cape. And then, mid-spin, I froze. Not because of fear, not because of hesitation, because something in the air had changed. A realization. A clarity so sharp, it sliced right through the fog of my thoughts. There was no going back. Not to the man I was, not to the life I lost, not to the world that spat on me, crushed me, and walked away. The Joker wasn't a mask. He wasn't a character. He wasn't a disguise. He was the truth, and truth, once born, cannot be buried again. I walked to the window, staring out over Gotham, the city that had chewed me up and spit me into a vat of despair. The sun was rising, painting the skyline in hues of gold and ash. It looked beautiful and rotten and full of opportunities. I pressed my palms to the glass, feeling the trembling in my fingers. Not fear, anticipation. What should we do today? I whispered to myself. To celebrate the birth of me. The answer came easily. Whatever made me laugh, whatever made them scream, whatever reminded the world that when you push a man too far, sometimes he doesn't break, he transforms. And transformation is, oh, so fun. I turned away from the window, my painted grin reflecting off every surface. Step by step, the Joker walked out of that apartment for the very first time, and Gotham had no idea what kind of beautiful nightmare had just been unleashed. The first time I walked through Gotham as the new me, I expected the city to recoil in terror, to scream, to faint, to run. But Gotham is a strange beast. It doesn't scare easily, not because it's brave, but because it's numb. Everyone here is too busy drowning in their own misery to notice a clown walking by at dawn with a grin carved into his face. They glanced at me, blinked, and went right back to their misery. How rude, but I wasn't offended. No, I found it inspiring. If the city didn't react to me naturally, I'd simply have to wake it up myself. After all, what's the point of being reborn if no one notices the miracle? So I set out to study my new playground. Every comedian needs to understand his stage, and Gotham, oh Gotham, is the greatest stage in the world. Skyscrapers rising like crooked teeth. Alleys full of secrets nobody wants to admit exist. Sirens singing their lullabies day and night. A perfume of gasoline, desperation and corruption hanging so thick in the air you can practically taste it. Perfect. I walked past a pair of officers drinking cheap coffee on the sidewalk. One of them glanced at me, eyes narrowing at my painted face. His hand drifted toward his holster, but he didn't draw. He didn't even speak, just stared. People stare at the strange, but they only fear the dangerous. I made a mental note. I need to become both. As I wandered, I found myself drawn to the heart of the city, those busy downtown streets where people rush like insects scurrying before a storm. Men in suits, women clutching bags, teenagers glued to screens, shop owners sweeping doorsteps they know will be filthy again in 5 minutes. All of them trapped in their tiny boxes of routine and obligation. And suddenly, I understood something so profoundly, I stopped right there on the sidewalk and burst into laughter. Everyone in Gotham was just like I used to be, trying, struggling, pretending to be normal, pretending to be happy, pretending that life made sense. But life doesn't make sense. Life is chaos, tragedy, cruelty, and randomness. Life is slipping on a bad joke and falling into a vat of chemicals. Life is losing the only person who mattered because the universe enjoys irony. And these people, these sheep, they were still trying to make the world behave. It was adorable, pathetic, in need of correction. I stopped in front of a storefront, a pawn shop. Its window displays glittered with stolen gold, dusty television sets, and a row of handguns locked behind glass. My reflection appeared in the window, white skin glowing in the sunlight, red smile shimmering with fresh makeup, eyes alive with possibilities. The man who once stood there would have walked away. The new me stepped inside. The bell rang, barely a chime, more of a whimper. The shopkeeper looked up, froze, then plastered on a nervous smile. How can I help you? I didn't answer. Just walked slowly toward the glass case of handguns, pressed my fingertips against the surface, smiled wider. You be looking to buy something, he stammered. Oh yes, I purred. A new toy. His Adam's apple bobbed. Which one? I pointed at a small revolver, silver and simple. Elegant, classic. A comedian needs good timing and a good punchline. This would do perfectly. He unlocked the case with trembling hands and placed the revolver on the counter. Will that be all? I leaned in closely, close enough to see sweat form on his brow. Oh, not even close. His eyes widened, and for the first time since my transformation, I saw what I'd been waiting for. Fear. Real, primal, electric fear that shakes the soul. Beautiful. I giggled. He gasped, and the comedy began. When I walked out of the shop a few minutes later, the gun felt light in my pocket. My heart felt lighter. My steps felt almost musical. For the first time, Gotham had reacted to me. Screams erupted behind me. People scattered like dominoes. Sirens wailed in the distance, rushing toward the shop. Finally they were awake. As I strolled down the sidewalk, I felt a warmth bloom in my chest, the delicious warmth of purpose. This city didn't need a hero. It didn't need saving. It needed truth. It needed chaos. It needed someone to hold up a mirror and show everyone what they really were. And I needed an audience. Gotham was a city worth breaking, and I was just getting started. Every comedian remembers their first real laugh, not the polite chuckles, not the forced smiles, the real laugh, the one that erupts from the audience like a volcano you finally convinced to explode. For me, that laugh didn't come from a crowd in a smoky bar. It didn't come from drunks or bored couples or critics pretending to understand humor. My first real laugh came from Gotham itself, and like any good joke, it started small. After leaving the pawn shop, with my new little revolver humming in my pocket like a secret begging to be told, I wandered through the city, drinking in the chaos I'd caused. Sirens wailed, people whispered, some crossed the street to avoid me. A few brave or stupid ones stared too long, as if trying to determine whether I was an escaped lunatic or a street performer who'd gone rogue. Both were correct. But even with all that noise, Gotham wasn't awake yet. Not fully, not enough. A single scream doesn't wake a sleeping beast. You need a roar. So I went looking for a stage big enough to deliver the city's first punchline. I found it at a busy intersection. Cars honking, people yelling into phones, street vendors frying grease-soaked food that smelled like regret and onions. Perfectly ordinary chaos, boring chaos. I walked right into the center of the crosswalk and raised my hands like a conductor summoning an orchestra. Cars screeched to a halt. Drivers leaned out of windows, cursing. A few pedestrians gasped. Attention, look at that. My first audience. Good morning, Gotham, I shouted, my voice echoing off glass and steel. Who's ready to laugh? Someone groaned. Someone else shouted, Get out of the road, freak. Rude, but the best crowds always start skeptical. I pulled the revolver from my pocket and held it high. Instant silence, all eyes on me, fear blossoming like a flower in fast motion. Delicious. Now that, I said, is comedic timing. A woman screamed. A man dropped his coffee. Someone called 911. I didn't aim the gun at anyone. Not yet. Comedy is about suspense, after all. Instead, I spun in a slow circle, arms wide, grin wider. Ladies and gentlemen, I announced, life is full of tragedy. Bills, traffic, bad haircuts, in-laws, corrupt politicians, crime, pollution, taxes. Oh, don't get me started on taxes. A nervous laugh escaped someone in the crowd. It was tiny, shaky, but real. My first chuckle. I bowed dramatically. Thank you, you've been a lovely crowd, but I'm afraid this set ends with a bang. I pressed the cold metal of the revolver to my temple. Gasps slapped the air. Someone shouted, Don't! Another yelled, Call the police! How sweet, how earnest, how utterly pointless. I pulled the trigger. Click, no bullet. A man fainted. A woman screamed, My God. Someone vomited into the gutter. And then I laughed so hard I nearly fell to my knees. Laughed until my ribs ached and my eyes watered. Laughed until the crowd realized they weren't watching a suicide, they were watching a performance. I bowed again, slow and theatrical. Oh, come now, don't look so shocked. Haven't you ever heard of a joke? Police sirens roared closer. Time to wrap up the act. I blew a kiss to the horrified audience and sprinted down the nearest alleyway, my laughter trailing behind me like a ribbon of madness. I slipped between dumpsters, scaled a fire escape, and perched on a rooftop as patrol cars flooded the street below. Officers poured out, barking orders, pointing guns at shadows. They were too late. Of course they were. I sat on the ledge, legs dangling, laughing so hard my stomach cramped. That was it. That was the moment I knew. I could make this city feel something again. Fear, shock, confusion, hysteria, laughter. I didn't need a stage. I didn't need a spotlight. I didn't even need a microphone. Gotham itself was my comedy club, and my show had only just begun. They say every man has a night that defines him, a night that burns so deeply into the skin of his soul that nothing, no amount of washing, crying or praying, can remove it. For most, that night breaks them. For me, it crowned me. Gotham was colder than usual that evening, the kind of cold that gnawed at your bones even through thick fabric. I felt it biting the edges of my coat as I stepped out of the dilapidated building I called home. The city lights flickered above as if Gotham itself was blinking, uncertain whether it wanted to stay awake or die already. And there I was, walking into a directionless future, one step at a time, utterly aware of how little I mattered. Or so I thought. The old me, the one who still believed in second chances, had died in that vat alongside my face, alongside my past. But transformation is never instant. The chemicals change my body in minutes. The madness that came in waves, delicious, unstoppable waves. Each day a new realization, a new awareness, a new truth unraveling in my head. That night, however, all the ripples became a tidal wave. I remember walking into a small, grimy bar in the Narrows, the kind of place where the lights hummed louder than the conversations. Everyone there looked like they were one missed paycheck away from robbing a store. They stared at me when I came in, my chalk-white skin, my blood-red lips, the green hair glistening under the neon. They didn't know whether to laugh or call the police. Then one brave idiot decided to make fun of me. "Hey, clown," he said, tilting his beer bottle. "Circus is the other way." I stared at him for 3 eternal seconds. Then I burst into laughter. Real, echoing, spine-shaking laughter. I didn't laugh because he was funny. I laughed because I finally understood myself. I understood the joke that was my life, the joke that was Gotham, the joke that was society pretending it wasn't rotting from the inside. And when I laughed, something in the room shifted. The man who mocked me suddenly shrank in his seat. A predator recognizes another predator before anyone else does. I walked toward him slowly, each step tapping against the wooden floor. My shadow danced on the stained walls. "You think I'm a clown?" I asked softly. The man swallowed. I was just messing around." "Oh, no," I said. "Please, don't backpedal. I want to understand your humor. Tell me the joke again." He stuttered, unable to say a word. And that's when I realized something beautiful. Fear was a language, and I finally spoke it fluently. I reached out and gently tapped his nose with a boop. The whole bar flinched. The man trembled violently, eyes darting toward the exit. But he didn't run. Oh no, fear is paralyzing. "Let me tell you a joke," I whispered in his ear. "What's green, white, and red all over?" Before he could answer, I snatched his bottle, smashed it on the table edge, and held the jagged glass inches from his throat. "You," I said, and smiled. The room froze. No one moved. No one breathed. I didn't cut him. I didn't need to. The power was already mine. For the first time in my miserable existence, people were hanging on my every gesture, my every twitch, my every smile. I felt untouchable. I dropped the bottle, patted his shoulder, and walked out of the bar like a king leaving his throne. Behind me, I heard someone whisper, "Who? What the hell was that?" And another voice, shaky yet reverent, No idea, but he's not someone you mess with. Oh yes, that was the night the city finally acknowledged me, not as a victim or a failure or a nameless face in the crowd, but as a presence, a force, a threat. Walking home, I felt a buzzing under my skin, like electricity humming in my veins. Not the chemicals, no, this was something else, something far more intoxicating. Power, purpose, identity. I wasn't chasing laughter anymore. I was the laughter. I wasn't searching for meaning. I was the meaning. And Gotham? Gotham was about to learn what I had always known deep inside. A man who has lost everything is a man who can do anything. That night, for the first time in my life, I didn't feel broken. I felt complete. People like to imagine that villains are created in a single explosive moment. One bad day, one trauma, one push off the cliff. But the truth is far more elegant. Madness is not a switch. It's a staircase. You descend one step at a time, until suddenly the ground is gone and you're laughing in freefall. After the bar incident, I felt something blooming inside me, a seed that had always been there, buried under years of hopelessness and humiliation. Now it was growing fast, twisting its way through my ribs, curling around my spine. It felt warm, liberating, addictive, but a feeling isn't enough to define a man. Actions define men, and I was ready, aching, to take my first true step. I wandered through the Narrows, with my hands in my pockets, humming a tune I didn't recognize. Streetlights flickered as if afraid to illuminate me. Gotham's rats scurried away when I walked past. I must have been smiling so wide it looked painful, because every person I passed quietly crossed the street. Fear suited me. It felt like perfume. Then I saw her. An elderly woman standing at a bus stop, clutching a handbag to her chest like it contained her beating heart. Her hands trembled from the cold, or maybe from life. She was the kind of person society forgets exists, an invisible ghost in a city of monsters. Once, I would have felt sorry for her. Not anymore. I approached slowly, whistling, letting my shoes click loudly against the pavement. She stiffened. That made me grin even wider. "Cold night," I said cheerfully. She nodded without looking at me. Yes. Waiting for the bus? Yes. Alone? Her breathing hitched, just a little, but I heard it. I savored it. Once upon a time, I had been the one feeling small and helpless. The world had eaten me alive. Now it was my turn to take a bite. I stepped closer. Do you know what I like about nights like this? They're quiet, too quiet. No witnesses, no interruptions, just possibilities. She backed away from me, clutching her bag tighter. The fear in her eyes was so pure, so raw, it was almost beautiful. I wasn't going to hurt her. Not physically. I had no interest in harming the innocent. That wasn't the point. My goal was simpler. I wanted to feel powerful. "Relax," I said, gently placing a gloved hand on her bag. "I just want to know what you're carrying. Jewelry? Cash? Maybe something more interesting?" She whimpered, a small sound, soft, fragile. I loved it, but just as I tugged lightly at the handbag, she closed her eyes and whispered, "Please, I have nothing. Please." And it hit me. Her begging sounded exactly like me, the old me, the useless, pathetic, desperate version I had worked so hard to bury. Suddenly I felt sick, not because I pitied her, but because her weakness disgusted me. I released her bag, stepped back and tilted my head. "Why do you let the world do this to you?" I asked. "Why let it crush you? Why let it turn you into prey?" She didn't answer. She simply trembled. I sighed, a long, dramatic sigh. "I wasn't going to rob you, you know. I just wanted to see if you had anything worth taking." Then I laughed. Not the deep, full-body laugh I had begun to master. No, this one was thin, sharp, and cruel, like a blade sliding between ribs. She ran, abandoning the bus stop entirely. Her small shoes slapped the pavement as she disappeared into the dark, and there I stood, alone, in the echo of my own amusement. But the thrill faded too quickly. Scaring her wasn't enough. Toying with her wasn't enough. Teasing the world wasn't enough. I needed more. I needed meaning, a statement. a debut. And as I walked away, hands still humming with leftover adrenaline, it dawned on me. I didn't want to commit a crime because I needed something. I wanted to commit a crime because the world needed something, a message, a symbol, a reminder that beneath Gotham's facade of order and justice, chaos was waiting, and I was ready to deliver it. By the time I returned home, I knew exactly what my first real crime would be. Something theatrical, something unforgettable, something that would make every newspaper in Gotham whisper my name like a curse. I sat at my cracked makeup mirror, stared at my reflection, the pale skin, the green hair, the red smile, and whispered, "It's time to give Gotham a laugh." And oh, did the thought of it make my heart flutter. If a crime is just a crime, then it's nothing more than a statistic, a headline, a blot of ink on a police report destined to collect dust. Boring, predictable, forgettable. But a message spreads like fire. And I wanted Gotham to burn. That night, after terrifying the poor old woman and discovering the delicious emptiness it left behind, I sat at my chipped desk, staring at a blank sheet of paper. My room was dark except for a buzzing lamp that flickered every few seconds, like it was dying of fear. Good. Everything in that room should fear me. I tapped my fingers against the table, 1, 2, 3, and waited for inspiration. Not the old kind of inspiration that came from desperation or survival. No, I was searching for something artistic, something worthy of the new man I was becoming. So, I whispered to myself, how does one introduce chaos to a city addicted to control? I leaned back, laced my fingers behind my head, and closed my eyes. Then the ideas came, not like slow drops of water, but like a bursting dam. A museum heist, too cliché. A bank robbery, predictable. Burning down City Hall, tempting, but premature. Then it struck me. Gotham didn't need another petty crime. Gotham needed a stage act. I opened my eyes, picked up a pencil, and began sketching. What emerged on the page wasn't a plan. It was a performance. A theatrical blueprint that danced between brilliance and lunacy. The target? Gotham's central chemical plant. Yes, that very same plant. My birthplace, my tomb, my resurrection pit. Returning there would be poetic, and believe me, poetry matters. If heroes have origin stories that define their legacy, why shouldn't villains? The plan was simple yet spectacular. Enter the factory through the old drainage tunnels, overload the pressure valves in the main chamber, trigger a chain reaction that would ignite the chemical reserve tanks, escape through the western ventilation shaft, leave behind something unmistakable, a calling card, a small white playing card, the Joker. I could already imagine the smoke rising against the night sky, painting Gotham with shades of green and purple. I could hear the panicked news reports, the sirens, the crowds gathering behind barricades. I could see the police chief sweating through his uniform as he tried to explain what happened. But above all, I could imagine him, Batman, the bat-shaped silhouette staring into the glowing fire, trying to decipher the meaning behind my act. Trying to understand me, trying and failing to anticipate my moves. Oh, the thought of it made my skin tingle. Once the blueprint was finished, I placed both hands on the desk and admired it like a proud father looking at his newborn child. It wasn't just a plan. It was my introduction to the world, my first signature, my first masterpiece, but I wasn't delusional. Chaos must be carefully crafted. Even madness requires discipline. So I spent the next 2 days gathering supplies. A set of rusted tools stolen from an abandoned garage, 3 canisters of pressurized solvent, a handful of electrical components scavenged from dumpsters, a red and white deck of playing cards. My costume. Ah, yes, my costume. It wasn't the polished, tailored suit the world would one day know. Not yet. This one was crude, an old purple coat from a thrift store, mismatched gloves, a faded vest, and shoes that squeaked with every step. But even then, I wore it proudly. It wasn't fashion, it was symbolism. I was shedding my old skin, and a serpent never sheds halfway. On the third night, I stood in front of a cracked mirror and applied my makeup with slow, deliberate care. The white base, the smeared red smile, the dark circles around my eyes. My hands moved with a painter's precision. When I finished, the reflection that stared back wasn't human. It was a promise of chaos, a promise of fear, a promise of laughter. "My masterpiece begins at midnight," I whispered. Outside, thunder rumbled as if Gotham itself felt the shift. The storm clouds were gathering. Lightning flashed through my window and illuminated the room, giving my silhouette a jagged, monstrous edge. Perfect. I folded the blueprint, slipped it inside my coat, and walked toward the door. I didn't look back. Why would I? There was nothing left in that room worth remembering. The world was waiting. The stage was set. And I, the newly born maestro of madness, was ready to conduct my first symphony, a symphony made not of violins or horns, but of explosions, screams, and laughter. Midnight arrived wrapped in rain, as if the sky itself feared what I was about to unleash, and attempted pitifully to wash the city clean before I stained it again. But Gotham was beyond cleansing. It had been rotting long before I came along. I was not a disease. I was a symptom, and tonight the symptom would erupt. I stepped into the drainage tunnels beneath the central chemical plant. The old metal grates groaned under my boots, and the stench of mold and industrial runoff seeped into my nostrils. Most people would gag. I inhaled deeply. It smelled like destiny. I moved slowly, humming to myself as water dripped rhythmically from overhead pipes. Every step echoed down the tunnel, the sound bouncing off walls and returning distorted, as if the darkness were laughing back at me. "I know," I whispered into the void. "I'm excited too." When I reached the grate that led into the lower maintenance chamber, I crouched and slid it open. The rusty metal screeched, a perfect note, sharp and discordant. I slipped through and entered the heart of the factory. Everything felt familiar yet alien. Shadows stretched long across the concrete. Machines hummed in deep mechanical breaths. Pools of chemicals glowed faintly under the emergency lights. This was the place where I died. How poetic that it would also be the place where I truly lived. I moved quickly. My hands worked with a surgeon's precision, unscrewing bolts, rerouting pressure valves, forcing open panels that had not been touched in years. I knew the layout like the back of my hand. Trauma has a way of carving itself into memory. As I tightened the final clamp, I paused and brushed my fingers against the metal. "Hello, old friend," I whispered. "Did you miss me?" A pipe hissed. I like to think it was answering. The mechanism was ready. All I needed to do was insert the improvised reactor overload device, something I had cobbled together from scrap metal and solvent canisters. Crude, yes, but powerful. A masterpiece doesn't need polish, it needs meaning, and this had meaning. I set the device in place and flicked the activation switch. A low whirring sound filled the chamber. The pressure gauges trembled, slowly climbing. 10%, 20%, 30%. The factory was coming alive. I walked toward the catwalk overlooking the main chemical reservoir. Rain pounded against the roof, each thud harmonizing with the rising hum of machinery. Lightning flashed through cracked windows, washing the factory in pale white light. Then the alarm sounded, a shrill, panicked wail, the sound of a system begging for mercy. I spread my arms. "Ah, music!" The gauges hit 40%. The pipes rattled. Steam burst from the joints. The lights flickered violently, as if the whole building was pleading with me to stop. But why would I stop? I leaned over the railing and pulled a single playing card from my coat pocket. The Joker. A crude drawing of a smiling fool wearing a crown of bells. I pressed it against my chest for a moment, letting the symbolism warm me. "This," I said softly, "is my rebirth. 50%, 60%, 70%. The factory shook. Cracks rippled across the floor. The air grew thick with chemical fumes. My heart danced in my chest. This was it, my moment, my first true laugh. 80%, 90%, 95%. The device beeped, a high, steady tone. I turned and headed for the western ventilation shaft, not running, just walking, savoring each heartbeat, each second, each step. Chaos should never be rushed. It must be savored like fine wine. Behind me, the alarm wailed louder, panicked. Machines sputtered, pressure valves burst, spraying chemical mist through the air like neon rain. I reached the ventilation hatch and climbed inside. The tunnel was narrow, claustrophobic, hot. With every foot I crawled, the temperature surged, sweat mixing with my makeup, streaking my cheeks with red and black. And then, boom! The first explosion shook the tunnel. Dust rained from above. I laughed. A deep, unhinged laugh that echoed down the metal shaft. Another explosion, and another, each one louder than the last. By the time I crawled out into the open air, the entire night sky behind me had been swallowed by flame. The chemical plant erupted in a geyser of green, purple, and white fire, colors that reflected off the storm clouds like some twisted aurora. I stood there, drenched in rain, arms wide open, face tilted toward the sky, and I laughed. I laughed so hard my ribs hurt. I laughed until the rain tasted sweet. I laughed until the world spun, until the fire danced like devils in the dark, until I felt more alive than I had ever been. The city now knew I existed, but more importantly, I knew I existed. My first laugh was not a sound, it was an explosion. Tonight, Gotham had heard my voice for the first time, and soon it would beg me to stop. The factory burned for hours. By the time I finally stopped laughing, the flames were still clawing at the sky, splitting the night apart like a giant open wound. Fire trucks screeched through the streets below, sirens slicing through the rain. Crowds gathered behind barricades, their silhouettes trembling in the flickering glow. Some screamed, some cried, others simply stared. I watched them from atop a rusted water tower a few blocks away, the perfect vantage point. My throne. Nothing tastes sweeter than the panic of a city realizing it's not in control. As the flames devoured the place of my rebirth, I sat cross-legged on the cold metal surface and wiped streaks of soaked makeup from my face. Not to clean myself. No, to smear it further, to distort it, to let the world see the rawness beneath the paint. Let them look upon the man they failed to break. Below, police officers shouted orders. Firefighters struggled against the chemical blaze. Journalists with trembling voices narrated a tragedy they didn't understand. And then the line I had been waiting for finally slipped through the radio static, drifting upward. We found a playing card at the scene. A joker card. A shiver rolled through me. Ecstasy, pride, anticipation. There it was. My first signature. My first calling card. It felt like inhaling pure electricity. But the true highlight of the night came moments later, when a single police spotlight cut across the rooftop of the plant. The beam illuminated the drifting smoke, and for a split second, through the haze, I saw him tall, dark, silent, a silhouette carved from fear itself. Batman, he'd arrived. My smile stretched wider. Of course he came. Tragedy is his dinner bell. But tonight wasn't about him stopping anything, no. Tonight was an introduction, a handshake between two forces destined to collide again and again. Across the distance, he stared at the inferno, and though I couldn't see his eyes, I could feel them, searching, analyzing, trying to make sense of a crime that wasn't driven by greed or revenge or desperation, a crime driven by artistry, by intent, by me. Oh, Batsy, I whispered to the night, you have no idea what you're in for. Lightning cracked overhead. The storm intensified, as if Gotham itself sensed the beginning of a new chapter, a darker chapter, a laugh-filled nightmare. For some time, I simply sat there watching the chaotic ballet below, the frantic urgency, the flashing lights, the confusion. It was beautiful, elegant even, and all of it caused by one little nobody who finally decided to become a somebody. Me. Eventually, when the flames began to die and the first hints of dawn crept behind the clouds, I hopped off the tower and disappeared into the rain-soaked alleyways. My shoes splashed through puddles of neon-colored runoff. My coat clung to my body. But my heart danced. Every shadow felt like it belonged to me. Every gust of wind carried the echo of that brilliant explosion. Every part of Gotham breathed differently now. It was subtle, but I could feel it. The city had shifted. It had woken up. Something new existed in its bloodstream. I walked with a lightness I hadn't felt since childhood. Only this time it wasn't hope filling my chest. It was purpose. People passed me on the street, their faces pale from fear or exhaustion. They didn't know I was the one who turned their quiet night into a spectacle. They didn't recognize the dripping paint or the wild smile. Not yet, but soon. Soon, every soul in Gotham would know me. Soon, my name would slither across every television screen, every newspaper headline, every whispered conversation. And not as a man, not as a criminal, not even as a monster, as a force. When I reached my apartment, my temporary lair, I tossed my soaked coat onto the floor, lit a candle, and sat at the desk. My fingers trembled with exhilaration as I unfolded another blank sheet of paper. If the chemical plant was the opening act, then I needed the next scene to be even grander. "Let's see," I muttered, tapping the pencil against my teeth. "What does Gotham need now?" The ideas poured out faster than I could write them. Gigantic pranks, elaborate puzzles, terror wrapped in punchlines. A crime spree unlike anything the city had ever seen. But as I sketched, one thought lingered. I wasn't just planning crimes. I was crafting a legend, a myth that would grow with every explosion, every laugh, every confrontation with the Bat. Tonight wasn't just my arrival, it was the beginning of my story, my era, my rise. And Gotham, poor Gotham, it didn't even know how to scream properly yet. But don't worry, I was going to teach it. Morning came slowly, like a coward afraid to peek over the horizon. The sunlight that finally crawled into my apartment was pale and sickly, as if even the sun felt nervous to shine on me after what I had done. Good, let it tremble. I sat at my desk, hunched over scraps of paper filled with sketches, diagrams, and little doodles of smiling faces. The candle had long since burned out, leaving a puddle of wax that looked like a melted ghost. My coat dripped quietly onto the floor in the corner. My hands, stained with a mix of makeup, ink, and chemical residue, tapped rhythmically on the wooden surface. Tap, tap, tap. The rhythm of a new world being born. I had dozens of ideas for my next theatrical stunt, but one concept kept tugging at me. Simple, elegant, and guaranteed to shove Gotham even deeper into fear. A joke. Not the kind you tell, the kind you perform. What's the best way to get someone's attention? Not by shouting, not by whispering, but by doing something so unexpected that they can't look away. So I chose my next target, not based on symbolism or revenge or chaos, but based on opportunity. Gotham National Bank. Now, before you roll your eyes and assume I planned a classic robbery, let me stop you right there. I had no interest in money. Money is boring, predictable, limited. Fear, however, fear is the only currency with infinite value. So my plan was simple. I would rob the bank, but take nothing. Imagine the hysteria, imagine the confusion, imagine the questions. Why? What does he want? What kind of criminal steals nothing? Ah, the beauty of it. The next night, I put my plan in motion. I traded my drenched coat for a cleaner one, adjusted the purple vest, brushed streaks of green from my hair, and reapplied my makeup with theatrical precision. My reflection grinned back at me. "Round two," I whispered. "Let's make them laugh." I slipped through the back alleyways of Gotham until I reached a narrow service entrance behind the bank. Two security guards smoked lazily beneath a flickering lamp, their conversation slow and mindless. They didn't notice me until I stepped directly into the light. "Evening, gentlemen," I said cheerfully. One dropped his cigarette. "Hey, who the hell are you?" I held up a finger. Ah, that's rude. You should introduce yourselves before asking for someone else's name." "It's polite!" They reached for their radios. I sighed. People in Gotham had no sense of humor. Before they could shout for help, I whipped out 2 small metal spheres, homemade flash charges, and tossed them at their feet. Boom! White light flooded the alley. The guards stumbled backward, blinded and disoriented, clutching their eyes. I patted each of them on the shoulder as I walked past. Don't worry. You'll get your vision back in, 6 to 8 hours. Probably. I slipped inside. The bank was quiet near closing time. A handful of employees worked late, tapping away at keyboards. They froze when they saw me, eyes widened, mouths opened. "Good evening, Gotham's finest unpaid laborers," I shouted, arms spread as if taking a bow. "I'm here for a withdrawal. But don't worry, I'm not taking your money, just your attention." Screams, chaos, panic, delicious. I hopped onto a counter, kicking aside a stack of deposit slips. "Everyone on the floor, not because I need you down there, just because it's more dramatic." They obeyed instantly. Fear makes people efficient. I strolled toward the vault room, humming a tune that existed only in my head. Inside, I inspected the towering metal door with a craftsman's appreciation. "I could blow you open," I whispered, "but that feels a bit crude." Instead, I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small device. Nothing more than a jury-rigged electronic disruptor. I pressed it against the keypad, twisted a dial, and watched the lights flicker. Beep, beep, click. The vault door slid open with a hiss. I stepped inside, my shoes echoing on the polished floor. Stacks of cash towered around me. Gold bars glimmered beneath fluorescent lights. Enough wealth to buy a small country. I ignored it all. Instead, I pulled out a single card, a joker. I placed it neatly on a pile of crisp bills. "There," I murmured. "Payment received." Then I turned, pulled a small speaker from my coat, set it on the vault floor, and pressed play. A recording of my laughter echoed through the bank, loud, manic, musical. I walked out, hands in my pockets. "All right, everyone," I shouted. "I'm leaving. You can stand up now, or don't. Honestly, do whatever feels right." The employees stared as I strolled toward the exit, rain beginning to fall outside. And then, the first police sirens. I stopped in the doorway, grinned, and bowed deeply. "Thank you, Gotham. This performance was funded by absolutely no one. I expect reviews by morning." With a flourish, I stepped into the night. By dawn, every news channel screamed the same headline: "Joker strikes again, steals nothing from bank, leaves laughing tape and calling card." Perfect. I didn't need their money. I had their fear, I had their confusion, I had their attention, and soon I would have their obsession. Yes, the sirens. You can hear them too, can't you? Even now, echoing between the words on this page. They never really stop in Gotham. They wail, they cry, they scream, just like the city itself. And on that particular night, they were singing for me. I was standing on the rooftop of an old chemical warehouse, fitting, poetic, deliciously ironic, looking down at the chaos I had orchestrated. The fires below flickered like candles on a birthday cake, and each explosion felt like someone clapping for my performance. A celebration, a tribute, a little reminder that Gotham can't help but dance whenever I decide to play conductor. The plan had been simple, childishly simple. I sent out a dozen decoy threats across the city. Fake bombs, fake hostage reports, fake poison leaks. The police scrambled like ants whose hill had been kicked apart. And while they panicked, while they spread themselves thin, while the Batman exhausted himself trying to figure out where I was nowhere near any of the places they searched. I was here, alone, laughing my lungs raw. From the rooftop, I could see the police lights darting around like confused little glow bugs. They'd figured out the truth eventually, of course. They always do. But the beauty lies in when they figure it out. Too early, and the trick isn't fun. Too late, and they stop playing the game. But just in time. Ah, that's where the sweet spot is. That's where the magic lives. I leaned against a rusty pipe, letting the night wind slap my face. It felt good, sharp, real. Gotham has this way of biting back every time you touch it, and that's why I love her. She may be dirty, cracked, moldy, corrupt, hopeless, but she's alive. And she never pretends to be anything else. You're running out of places to hide, a voice growled behind me. Oh, I knew that voice, that jagged, gravel-soaked, humorless snarl. I turned around slowly, savoring every millisecond like a melt-in-your-mouth chocolate. And there he was, Batman, framed against the moonlight, cape swinging, fists clenched, jaw locked tighter than an Arkham cell. He always arrives exactly when the symphony reaches its crescendo, predictable, reliable, beautiful. Hide? I laughed. Bats, my dear boy. Why would I hide from the only man who makes life interesting? He didn't answer. Instead, he took one step closer, heavy, calculated, threatening enough to scare any normal person. But I'm far from normal, aren't I? I know what you're planning, he said. Oh, I grinned. Then you're already one step ahead of the police. Mazel tov. He didn't flinch. He never does. That's what infuriates me, and what fascinates me. You won't hurt anyone else tonight. His confidence was adorable, like watching a toddler place their hands on their hips and announce they're in charge of the playground. I clapped slowly, mocking him. The sound echoed across the rooftop. Bats, bats, bats! You really think I'm the one hurting people? Gotham hurts herself. I just encourage her creativity. Before he could speak again, the sirens below crescendoed, louder, closer, harmonizing with the tension between us. I leaned forward, whispering, "Do you know what tonight really is?" His eyes narrowed. "A test," I continued. "Not for me, for you. Because sooner or later, you're going to have to admit that you need me. Without the Joker, Batman is just another rich guy in a costume, punching poor people in alleys." His jaw tightened, a bull ready to charge, but I wasn't finished. "You chase me. You stop me. You lock me up. I escape. You chase me again. It's the dance, Batsy, the rhythm, the heartbeat of Gotham. And you know what? I think—" I pressed a hand to my chest dramatically. "I think you love it." For a split second, just one, he hesitated, and that hesitation was glorious. But then he lunged, faster than I expected, faster than last time. He tackled me against the rooftop floor, pinning my arms down with that unbreakable grip of his. But do you know the funniest thing? I was still smiling, because he didn't realize yet. The real punchline had not even begun. And I was about to show him. He pinned me hard against the gravel-coated rooftop, his knee pressing into my ribs, his forearm crushing my wrists into the cold concrete. It hurt, deliciously so. Pain is just the body's way of reminding you that you're alive. And oh, how alive I felt at that moment. The sirens below, the helicopter spotlights sweeping across the smoke-filled skyline, the heat of Batman's glare burning into my skull. Gotham was singing, and we were her lead performers. "Where is it?" he growled. "That's the thing about bats. They echo, they screech, they hiss, but they never smile. They don't know how. Not like I do." "Where is what, darling?" I purred. "My dignity? My manners? My childhood trauma? You'll have to be more specific." He tightened his grip. A crunch echoed inside my arm. Might have been bone, might have been gravel. Hard to tell, really. He was losing patience, and that was exactly what I wanted. "The bomb, Joker." Ah, there it was. The magic word. I giggled, but it came out strangled because he was still practically crushing my throat. "You mean the bomb?" I wheezed. "Or the other one? Or the other one? Or the—" "Stop." His tone shifted. Not angry, focused, sharp. He wasn't playing anymore. He knew me too well. He knew when jokes were jokes and when jokes were warnings, which meant he knew there was a bomb. He just didn't know where. "Batsy, Batsy," I said softly, letting my voice glide like silk. "You're standing on it." He froze. It wasn't dramatic. He didn't gasp or widen his eyes. Batman doesn't do theatrics. That's my job. But I felt it. The tension, the slight shift in weight, the way his muscles locked in that microsecond of realization. "You rigged the building?" he asked. "No," I said proudly. "I rigged the block, the whole sweet, lovely, unsuspecting block, with a pressure switch right under this rooftop. If I go down, boom." His grip loosened just enough for me to breathe. Not enough to escape, not yet, but enough to let him think. Batman loves thinking. It makes him feel in control. "You wouldn't kill yourself," he said. That made me laugh so hard it echoed across the skyline. Oh, bats. That's adorable. Really. But you still don't understand, do you? I leaned forward until my lips almost brushed his cowl. I don't fear death. I fear boredom. He pushed me back down. You're lying, he said. And maybe I was, and maybe I wasn't. That's the fun of it. Go on, detective, I whispered. Check the floor. His eyes darted around, calculating, mapping, listening. He pressed 2 fingers to his gauntlet, activating whatever fancy little scanner he'd cooked up in his millionaire cave. And beep, 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 beep. A lovely little rhythm, like a robotic heartbeat. His gaze snapped toward the northeast corner of the roof. There, under a loose steel plate, a small red light blinked lazily, as if waving hello. You really did it, he muttered. Told you, I said cheerfully. Always trust a clown. We commit to the bit. He stood up slowly, dragging me with him, still holding my arm like a leash. He kept his body angled between me and the blinking light, as if shielding the bomb from me made any difference. You know I can disarm it, he said. Of course you can, I answered. You're the bat. It's what you do. Then why tell me where it is? I grinned wide, showing every tooth. Because it's not the real bomb. He didn't flinch. He didn't blink. He didn't move a muscle. Explain, he demanded. I will, I promised, in just a moment. And then, oh, this is my favorite part. I pointed behind him. He didn't turn. Batman never falls for that trick. But he should have, because this time it wasn't a trick. A second red light had begun blinking directly behind him, rising slowly from the ventilation grate like a firefly. His eyes widened just enough for me to notice. Batsy, I said softly, you're standing in the middle of a chain reaction. Before he could react, before he could grab a device, a wire cutter, a deactivation code, I leaned close and whispered, and it starts in 3. He tensed. 2. He reached for the first bomb. 1. And then, boom! No, not yet. Not that bomb, anyway. The one that went off was much, much closer. The explosion wasn't the grand, earth-shattering kaboom Batman expected. It wasn't meant to be. No mushroom cloud. No firestorm ripping through the night. No catastrophic collapse of Gotham's whole East Block. No, this one was elegant, precise, personal. A flash of light erupted beneath the rooftop, followed by a low metallic whoomph that shook the floor like a giant exhaling. The concussion wave knocked Batman sideways, just enough, not enough to injure, not enough to kill, just enough to break his balance, just enough to loosen his grip on my arm. And just like that, I was free. I rolled backward across the gravel, laughing hysterically as the rooftop groaned beneath us, dust rising like stage smoke. Batman recovered quickly. Of course he did, but I'd already put 5 or 6 meters between us. He stood, cape billowing, jaw set, eyes narrowed with that quiet fury he pretends not to feel. He hates when he miscalculates. It's the closest thing he has to embarrassment. You set off a shaped charge, he said, scanning the floor. Directional, targeted beneath me. Ah, bats! I clapped my hands delightedly. You do pay attention in science class! He stepped toward me. I stepped back. Oh, no, no, no! I wagged a finger. We're not doing the punching part yet. That comes later. You're skipping to the end of the book before reading the chapters. He stopped, not because he obeys me, no, 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 but because he was analyzing, adjusting, filing away new data. That's his thing. Every time I surprise him, he grows a little sharper, a little faster, a little more dangerous. It's beautiful, really, watching him evolve because of me. What was the purpose? He asked. A distraction? A distraction? I scoffed. Please, give me some credit. His silence meant he was waiting, so I told him. That boom down there, I said, pointing at the metal grate where smoke was lazily drifting up, wasn't to hurt you. It was to open something. What? I grinned. My escape route. Right on cue, the grate slid fully aside. A round industrial lift platform began rising from below, one of those old hydraulic ones used for moving heavy crates. But tonight, it carried something much more interesting. A box. A large rectangular steel crate. Padlocked. Reinforced. marked with a painted smile. Batman instantly shifted into that stance he takes when he expects the worst. Knees bent, arms ready, cape angled to shield. Good instincts, but unnecessary. "It's not a bomb," I said. "Then what is it?" "A gift." He didn't relax, not even a millimeter. The lift locked into place with a clang. The crate towered between us now, nearly 2 meters tall, humming faintly with some interior mechanism. Batman's voice lowered. "What did you put inside, Joker?" I walked around the crate, trailing my fingers along the cold metal. Something special, unique, one of a kind, something that will change our little relationship forever. His jaw tightened. "What is in the box?" Oh, how I loved that tone, that precision, that demand for truth in a world built on lies. So I opened my arms wide, like a carnival barker. "Behind this door, ladies and gentlemen, is the real punchline of tonight's performance." He moved toward the crate, and I pressed a small button hidden in my palm. Hiss! The crate's locks disengaged with a serpent-like whisper. Batman tensed. I smiled wider. The front panel slowly swung open, steam spilling out. For a moment, even I held my breath. Then the steam cleared, and there it was. A chair, a simple chair, with someone tied to it, someone gagged, someone bruised, someone shaking. "Don't move!" Batman barked, lunging forward. I didn't follow him. I didn't need to. I just leaned against the crate and watched the scene unfold like a proud playwright. He reached the hostage in seconds, checking their restraints, scanning for traps. So methodical, so predictable. He didn't ask who they were. Not yet. He was too busy disabling the tiny blinking device taped beneath the chair. Good boy, safety first. When he finished, when the hostage was clear of immediate danger, when he finally turned to face me with that cold, murderous stare, that's when he asked, "Who is this?" I spread my arms. My grin nearly split my face. "This, my dear Batsy, is the person who knows the truth about you." His eyes narrowed behind the mask. "What truth?" I tapped the side of my head. "The truth you've spent your whole life trying to bury." For the first time tonight, just for a fraction of a second, Batman hesitated. And oh, that hesitation tasted like victory. Batman froze, not in fear, not in weakness, but in calculation. His greatest strength and his greatest flaw. He always needs to know. He always needs to understand the angle, the motive, the threat. And I had just dangled the juiciest mystery of his life right in front of him. He turned back toward the hostage, who was still trembling in the metal chair, wrists bound, gag tight, eyes wide like an animal trapped in headlights. This one wasn't pretending. The terror was real, raw, and delicious. "Who is this?" he repeated, voice low, controlled. I stepped lightly along the edge of the crate, hands behind my back as if giving a guided tour. "A historian," I said. "A researcher. A little mole digging too deeply in the wrong archives." Batman's jaw tensed. "Archives about what?" "About you, darling," I said, throwing my arms wide. "About the early years, the ones no one talks about, the ones even the Wayne Foundation likes to redact." He said nothing, which meant I'd hit a nerve, time to dig deeper. "You know, it's amazing how much information gets scrubbed from public record when a billionaire feels embarrassed," I continued. "Names vanish, testimonies disappear, entire case files get lost in transport. But someone always remembers, someone always keeps notes." I tapped the hostage's head lightly with one gloved finger. "And this little librarian of secrets found something they weren't meant to find." Batman stepped between me and the hostage, blocking my path, protective, possessive, predictable. "What did they find?" he demanded. "Oh, come on, Batsy," I pouted. "At least let me set the stage before you ruin the climax." He took one step toward me. Just one. But it was enough to send a delicious spike of anticipation through my spine. So I continued. "You see, long before the cape, long before the theatrics, long before your grief turned into muscle memory, there were rumors." I paced slowly. Rumors of a young heir who wasn't always the shining symbol of morality the world thinks he is. I leaned forward, whispering, rumors of a child who didn't just witness violence, but maybe, sometimes, committed it. He didn't move. Didn't breathe. Didn't blink. Good. Let the silence marinate. You're lying, he finally said. Oh, I probably am, I chirped. But the fun part is, you don't know which part. The hostage made a muffled sound, shaking harder now. Batman turned and ripped the gag from their mouth. The hostage gasped violently, air rushing in like they'd been drowning for hours. Tell me what you know, Batman commanded. And that's when the hostage blurted out, it wasn't supposed to exist. The file, your name was in it, your childhood file. They destroyed it 30 years ago, but a copy survived. Batman stiffened. Oh, this was delicious. What was in the file? He asked. The hostage swallowed hard. Their voice shook. Incidents, hospital reports, behavioral notes, before your parents died, psychological evaluations from a private clinic. Something happened when you were 8, something the Waynes paid to bury. Batman slowly turned his head toward me. Now we were getting to my favorite part. You fabricated this, he said to me coldly. Did I? I grinned. There is no file, he insisted. Oh, Bats, there might not be now, I said. But there was, and this adorable little truth sniffer found the only surviving references. The hostage nodded frantically. I didn't even know what I had found until he grabbed me. Batman glared at me. You kidnapped them. Kidnapped is such an ugly word, I sighed. I redirected their research. For the greater good, for science, for drama. He stepped forward. And what do you gain from this? Oh, you don't see it, I said, almost disappointed. This isn't about what I gain, Bats. It's about what you lose. I leaned close, lowering my voice to a whisper sharp as a razor. Control. His fists tightened. You think you know yourself, I murmured. But what if the one thing your entire crusade is built on, your trauma, your transformation, your moral compass, wasn't a clean origin story? What if little Bruce Wayne wasn't just a victim? What if he was something else? Enough. No, I laughed. Tonight's not about bombs or chaos or our dance across the rooftops. Tonight is about me giving you a gift. I gestured theatrically toward the hostage. A person who can tell you who you really were before the mask. He stared at me, silent, unreadable. Then I added softly, and who you might still be underneath it. For a long, tense moment, no one moved. Then the rooftop creaked. A new sound. A mechanical sound. Batman's head snapped toward the crate, just as a second compartment began to open. Oh, I said with delight, you might want to stand back for this part, because inside that second compartment was something he never expected. The second compartment unfolded like the petals of a steel flower, slow, deliberate, ominous. Steam poured out again, rolling across the rooftop in ghostly tendrils, wrapping around our feet like curious little snakes. Batman stiffened. The hostage whimpered. I giggled. Oh, this is the best part, I whispered. This is where the audience starts questioning reality. The panel dropped fully open, and inside was another chair. Identical. Same straps. Same configuration. Same ominous blinking light attached beneath it. But this chair wasn't empty. Someone was sitting in it. Someone bound, gagged. Someone wearing a cowl, a black cowl. A cowl that looked exactly like Batman, I announced with a flourish. Meet Batman! The Batman standing beside me didn't move, but I saw it. The micro flinch at the corner of his jaw. The slightest shift in his stance. The tiniest fracture in that stoic mask of calm. He stared at the bound figure in the second chair. Same suit, same cape, same armored plating, same symbol, a mirror, a duplicate, a riddle made of flesh and confusion. He stepped closer. Who is this? He demanded. Oh, now you're asking good questions, I said. Is it an imposter? A clone? A decoy? An actor I kidnapped and dressed up? A psychological experiment? A hallucination? A metaphor? The hostage shook uncontrollably in their bonds, eyes flicking between the two Batmen like a cornered animal trying to track two predators at once. Batman, my Batman, approached the other one. He reached out slowly, cautiously, as if expecting the figure to vanish like smoke, but the figure was solid. He tugged the gag off the cowl, revealing a lower face scarred, bruised, and cracked with dried blood. And then the bound figure spoke. I tried to stop him." His voice was rough, strained, but unmistakably familiar. Batman froze. Even I felt a chill. The voice, it was identical, perfectly identical. Down to the gravel texture, the cadence, the grit. "That's impossible," Batman growled. "Is it?" I mused. "Gotham is full of little surprises, doppelgangers, deep-fake tech, masks better than masks, people who want to be you, people who think they're you, people who might even believe it more than you do." He turned to me. "What did you do?" "Me?" I said, placing a hand dramatically on my chest. "I didn't do anything but present the truth. You're the one who has to interpret it." The bound Batman coughed, wincing in pain. He said you needed to see me. He said you couldn't keep pretending." "Pretending what?" the real Batman snarled. "That you're alone." Something shifted behind Batman's eyes. A flicker, a tremor, a memory he didn't want surfacing. So I stirred the pot. "You see, Bats," I said, circling them both like a vulture, "all these years you've been convinced that your identity is singular, that you're unique. But look at this man." I grabbed the bound figure's chin roughly and lifted his head. "Look at him." He did. "This isn't a mask," I continued. "This isn't cosplay. This is someone who thinks like you, moves like you, fights like you. Someone who has the same scars, the same old breaks in the same old bones. Someone who didn't just imitate the Bat." I leaned forward and whispered, "He lived him." "Stop," Batman growled. "Oh, don't be like that. There's a beautiful question here, and I want to savor it with you." I spread my arms wide over the two Batmen. "Which one of you is the imitation?" Neither spoke. The hostage whispered shakily, He told me the file mentioned dissociative, something, identity formation, early trauma." Batman cut them off sharply. "Enough." "Oh, but this is where it gets fun," I cackled. "Two Batmen, one file, a lost childhood record, a buried incident, a duplicate living your life, someone who believes he's the real one." Batman clenched his fists. "You're trying to break me." "I could try forever," I said, "and never succeed. You're unbreakable, Bats. That's why I adore you." I leaned in until our faces were inches apart. "I don't want to break you." I lifted a finger. "I want to confuse you." Then I pointed to the bound Batman. "He knows the truth." I pointed to the hostage. "They found the truth." Then I pointed at the real Batman. "And you? You're the only one who doesn't." The wind howled across the rooftop. The city rumbled below. The sirens faded into a distant hum. For the first time in a very long time, Batman looked genuinely rattled. Good, because the punchline was still coming. From behind the second chair, a low mechanical beep began to rise. Batman turned sharply. "What now?" "Oh," I said, smiling ear to ear. "Just the timer I set on Phase 3. His eyes widened. "There's a Phase 3? "There's always a Phase 3. The beeping accelerated. The bound Batman began to panic. The hostage screamed. And Batman finally realized he was out of time. The beeping intensified, fast, frantic, rising like a heartbeat sprinting toward collapse. Batman scanned the second chair, his gauntlet display flashing warnings, micro-readings, chemical signatures. He didn't need to speak. I could see the realization hit him like a collapsing cathedral. This wasn't a bomb. Not the kind that explodes outward, anyway. "It's a neural detonator," he muttered. "Correct," I chimed. "You're such a good student." The bound Batman thrashed, the blinking device under his chair accelerating into a shrill crescendo. The hostage screamed, shrinking back as if distance meant anything at all. Batman dropped to one knee, working frantically. Wires, circuit patterns, neural transmitters. The whole thing was wired straight into the duplicate's nervous system like a mechanical parasite. "It's going to trigger a memory collapse," Batman growled. "A total identity wipe." "Very poetic way to say erase his mind." I nodded approvingly. "And not just any mind. Your mind. His version of it, at least." He shot me a murderous glare. "Why?" "Oh, Bats," I sighed, because I wanted you to see it, to stare into the mirror and wonder, just for 1 second, if he was the real one, and you were the copy. I tapped my temple. Identity is fragile, paper thin, tearable. The beeping shrieked, the duplicate screamed, and Batman made his choice. He yanked a panel off the neural detonator, sparks flying, and plunged his hand into the circuitry. Electricity arced up his arm, his entire body shuddering violently. The hostage wailed, the duplicate convulsed, and Batman absorbed the entire discharge into his own gauntlet. The rooftop went silent. The bound Batman slumped in the chair, unconscious but breathing. Batman fell to one knee, smoke rising from his armor. The neural detonator sputtered and died, its lights going dark. I clapped slowly. "Oh, bravo, bravo. You saved your little shadow. I knew you wouldn't let him die even if he was inconvenient." He didn't get up, but he looked at me. "You lose," he said quietly. I stepped closer. "Do I? You didn't break me." No, I didn't." I crouched down, bringing my face to his. "But I did something much, much better." He didn't ask. He didn't have to. I grinned. "I made you ask questions you can't unask." I tapped his forehead lightly. "You're wondering now, aren't you? Whether that file was real, whether your childhood was clean, whether this man," I gestured to the unconscious duplicate, "is a fraud or a fragment of a truth you'll spend years trying to find." I stood and spread my arms. "That's the trick, Bats. Not breaking you, destabilizing you." He pushed himself up slowly. "You're sick. I'm an entertainer. You endangered innocent lives." "No," I said, leaning close again. "I endangered your certainty." He clenched his jaw. I could almost hear the storm inside his head. Analysis, deduction, counter-deduction, suspicion tightening like barbed wire. He expected a confession, a reveal, a punchline that made everything clean and comprehensible. But that's not how I work. "You want the truth?" I whispered. He didn't answer, so I gave it to him anyway. There is no real Batman. There is no real Joker. We're both just stories that got out of hand. I backed away, smiling wider than ever. "And tonight I added a new chapter to your story. One you'll never remove, no matter how many files you find or fix." He stepped forward, but I was already retreating toward the edge of the rooftop, where a small drone lift hummed quietly beside the rail. "You're coming with me," he said. "Oh, sweetheart," I laughed. "You can't catch me tonight. You've got 2 other people to save, and a whole existential crisis to unpack." I hopped onto the drone platform. "See you soon, Batsy." He tried to lunge, but his legs buckled. The neural shock hadn't fully worn off. I winked. "By the way, there never was a real bomb on the block, just a few fireworks. The danger was never outside." I tapped my head again. It was always in here. The drone lifted me into the night sky, Gotham shrinking beneath me as Batman stared up from the rooftop, 2 rescued lives behind him, 1,000 unanswered questions ahead. And oh, the sight of him standing there breathing hard, fists clenched, brain spiraling. It was perfect. It was victory, because the greatest joke I ever told wasn't about chaos, or death, or madness. It was this. I made the Batman doubt himself, and nothing explodes louder than doubt.